All right, so today is September 19th, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. First things first, we'll kind of round off on who we've contacted so far. So I have a bit of news from Spencer, and I'll just read it to you now, and we'll see how everyone reacts. So this is about Spencer and Jeff. So Spencer responded, "Hey gang, I spoke with Jeff, and as much as we're interested in what you're up to, we're both a bit too slammed with other projects to be involved in a creative capacity at this time. I wish you all the luck." Any thoughts?
I think we should just ask them if there are other people they know that might be interested, or other people that were on their team.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I'll follow up with them, see if there's any other directors or anyone of an artistic capacity who can help us. Other than that, I'm still following up with Derek and Max, so I'll let you know when they're able to speak to us. But I know if you didn't see my post, Max is still working on that Thacker Pass, and recently they were fined $50,000 for installing like a bathroom for the native elders. So they're trying to fight that. Yeah, it's they're going through some tough times out there.
Yeah, everybody is. But yeah, on my part, Faulty's out of jail, and things are going really slow because I'm waiting for Blondie, and she's sick. So she said we have a call. If she's not too sick, then she didn't call back. So I presume she's too sick. So yeah, that's going slowly, and Forty asked me to pursue the IB thing for Veneratio 5 squatting on that IB thing. So I filed a complaint in IB's name, and yeah, still the Extinction Rebellion sub is still squatting on that. But Blondie said she would follow up on that and try and contact him, try and get him to give that up. Apart from that, I think the closing ceremony thing would be later in the year, sometime like November or so after COP or something like that. But, we're just waiting for Blondie's opinion on what to do for that closing ceremony. Otherwise, things are pretty slow. I think that's all I've got on that score. I think that strike on the 17th, I didn't hear anything about it. Didn't hear a peep, and that's so that didn't go too well. And yeah, what was something else? Can't remember. yeah, I think the IP things are just going to carry on going. I've been kind of following that on, on the media and stuff, and it's pretty predictable stuff. But it's getting in the media, but it's not international. So which is kind of what was expected. But we'll see how that goes. Apart from that, I don't know. I got a general feeling that everybody's kind of like Spencer and Jeff and that they're not really interested in. Everybody knows that there's a collapse going on, but they're kind of not really interested. They're kind of putting their heads in the sand, is my impression. That's about all I've got to report.
I got, thank you very much for supporting me in writing the email to the probation officers. So it's sent, and I'll keep you posted. I'll forward the emails when I get the replies. I've had no reply from Paul Kingsnorth and Mark Boyle after a week, so I expect the same thing. They're all wrapped up in, well, especially Paul is wrapped up in his new book launch and his new religious venture. So I'm expecting it might not be interested in interacting with us, but we'll see. If anything else, I think all the Darren hasn't replied to my last email, but I'll send a little one now and again to just keep in touch with him. I don't see anything else to report.
It's slow. Yeah.
I think there's a big fatigue post-COVID kind of. People are talking about post-COVID now. They think that it's over. I mean, in Europe, I don't know how it is in America, but in where we are in Europe here at the moment, it's just like it's unreal. It's pushed back, and yeah, it's all about getting back to business and everything.
Yeah, I think it is fatigued. Yep, people have collapse fatigue. I get a strong impression. But yeah, yeah, I think it's only just started. It's not really over at all. But people are kind of whistling through the graveyard. But from the things I've posted, you can see what I think, and that's that. It's what I predicted actually right in the beginning, that they would just be forced to give up and just become like Denmark, just carry on and take a hit. Yeah, it's very funny about the pandemic is that people are kind of delusional in the sense that they keep on forgetting the difference between containment and herd immunity, and so even the experts they talk as if we can reach herd immunity, even though a number of things have established that we cannot get to herd immunity. If we can't get to herd immunity, you might as well stop vaccinating, stop doing anything. But people still say, "Oh, we must vaccinate." I say, "Why?" And basically, if you think about it logically, you won't actually keep people out of hospital because eventually everybody will get it. So everybody has to roll the dice. You just basically lengthen the time it takes till people, throw the dice. But if we can't reach herd immunity, what it means is that everybody has to roll the dice with this disease. And so you can say, well, okay, I'm going to get a vaccination, and then at least the mortality will be better. And say, well, it doesn't work like that. It wears off, and eventually you will get a variant that you will have to face. So you don't get out of facing it because of the vaccine. So people are being entirely illogical, and then people talk about crossing borders and then being in quarantine, and all of that is useless. It's basically because that is something you do before containment, and we've passed the milestone of containment. We missed that, so testing, border controls, all those things are useless. And then, the next milestone was herd immunity. We can't get to herd immunity, and we knew that as soon as we found people, had the disease more than once. So yeah, people are just carrying on, kind of this delusional Monty Python kind of thing. But basically, the virus has entirely defeated us. So they're just going through the motions, just kind of, maintaining this veneer of control and stuff like that. But what they should do is just say like, we tried our best, we lost, carry on. There's only one thing you could possibly do, and that's seal off borders and stop travel. And since they won't do that, it's like, okay, well, that's it. We just carry on, and it eventually becomes endemic, and but my estimate on the death toll is still 100 million, like it was from the start. So we're about 5 million into 100 million deaths. And that's my my take on it. If anybody's got a different idea, then let's hear it.
No, I kind of agree with you. That's the way I see things unfolding. It's this delusion and this addiction to business as usual is going to lead us down that way to more death. But I think it will be a lot of other things are going to happen in the meantime that are going to interfere with that. There's going to be so many other factors that are happening with the collapse that it's going to become a big mess. Like, it's not just going to be COVID. It's going to add up to so many other things.
Yeah, my guess is that the next thing is coming along soon, and people will forget about COVID. So the kind of thing is exactly like AIDS. It's like AIDS was a big terror for a while, and then it's still a pandemic. The AIDS pandemic is still going on, but like, who knows that? Everybody assumes it isn't. But to actually get to herd immunity, we would have to vaccinate Africa, and we can't do it. We can't get to, they're around 2% now. At that rate, it would take them 50 years to get herd immunity with the vaccine. And the vaccine is already, it has a half-life of about 6 months. So, all the vaccines. So it's as I said right at the beginning, the logistics of vaccinating the entire global population is not possible. So these other things that they defeated, like polio and stuff like that, they did that by containment. We passed the point of containment, so those are not options. But it's funny how delusional people are. I'm right next to this guy, a German guy. I only got to talk to him for about an hour just before we both had to leave. But he's a virologist, and he was completely irrational. So he's an Austrian virologist, and we're talking about the virus. And he says, the only thing to do is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. I said, well, what's the point of that? Because, we can't get to herd immunity because of Africa. So he says, well, we should seal off Africa. And I said, well, no politician's going to do that. In this woke environment, nobody's going to seal off Africa. So he admitted. So I said, well, why you keep on saying vaccinate, vaccinate, this vaccinate mantra? You've just admitted vaccination isn't going to do diddly squat. But still, cling to the little rabbit's foot, people just cannot give up. Anyway, that's kind of Gary's thing about giving up. Gary had a question about giving up. And so maybe if anybody doesn't, maybe we should move on from the plague conversation to the giving up conversation. Does anybody want to talk any more about the plague?
I just have an observation that from my neck of the woods here, the perspective is that the injections being mandated. The president announced that. So a lot of organizations are mandating that among employees, and a lot of employees are quitting, especially in the healthcare field. So I think officials know that mandating will have effects on the workforce where people will quit, but they continue to mandate it. So they're not dumb. So maybe they're just really trying to destroy um, the economy, healthcare for people. Yeah, I can just see that a lot of people are gonna quit, and so hospitals are short on nurses and doctors, and um, so I think why would a politician pigheadedly mandate something that they know would decimate the workforce even more?
Well, the answer is simple, and that's that they have to look like they're in control. So they, yeah, it's an indication of how they're going to be during collapse. So what you're seeing now is the mentality of somebody who thinks they're in charge. So you see the same thing in Katrina and things like that. Is these guys have it in their heads that I'm the guy who's supposed to respond. I'm in charge of looking after the sheep. So they'll do anything. They're not logical or anything like that. And then there are all these reverse incentives, like, they're pushed by advisors that are rotten and kind of corrupted by a profit motive. And so this is vastly, vastly profitable for, all these, for big pharma to have endless boosters and that, we're talking, to get herd immunity in the world would need about 7 billion, 7 billion people vaccinated twice. So just think of all the money involved in that. And so basically the medical advice is rotten with perverse incentives. And then the politicians, except in places like Denmark, they can't say, like, guys, we've lost, nothing we can do. Because basically they would get voted out by somebody who said, well, Joe Biden said we can't do anything. I say we can do something. And the guy gets elected easily by just saying crap like that. So demagogues, are stuck. I think that's what a lot of people, like, and especially in like Extinction Rebellion, don't realize is the politicians are largely stuck. They kind of doing all these forced moves, and all the forced moves say, like, to get elected, you have to kiss butt with all these rich corporations, and so they have to compromise all the way down the line. The net effect is they don't really have any power, so they're kind of hostage to their own situation. And that's kind of how it's going to be in other crises. So you imagine, things like if there's weather disasters or something like that, climate disasters, then they will do geoengineering, because geoengineering is exactly the same as vaccination. It has the appearance of being in control, even though it's more of a disaster. So I think the vaccines will probably, they're likely, from what the research I read, was they're likely to drive the variants. That's what's happened in some of the livestock. So when they did messenger RNA vaccines in livestock, it did drive superbugs and cause the emergence of superbugs. So you should expect that to cause more harm than good. But that's the impetus is to control. And in almost every case, you'd probably want to, not do control. Yeah, I mean, the kind of control is to, isolate people, break communication, slow things down. It's kind of like doing nothing is the kind of control you want. But the idea of being proactive and doing something is what these guys are elected to do. We elect them to do something. And so we can guarantee they're going to do something, and that's never going to be right because it's a complex system. But no one elects them to do nothing. And you have to be a very, very good leader to say, no, we're going to do nothing. You're going to do fuck all. And then, you would get everybody would say, like, you've got to do something. People would be in the streets with placards, do something. And you say, no, we know better than that. You wouldn't be considered a very good leader. We have this association in our minds. Leaders do stuff. It's like, yeah, dumb people do stuff. Smart people back off. So basically, we've elected people that are intrinsically dumb. And that's going to cost us dearly as collapse comes in. You see, this is a very good foretaste of how crises are dealt with. And we're going to go from crisis to crisis. It's basically in a Malthusian catastrophe. And so you can assume that all the fixes are going to be counterproductive, as they normally are.
Great. Thank you. Abandon hope, all ye join the forum.
Not quite. You see, there's a different kind of hope. You see,
different kind of hope.
As long as you got the word, yeah, you see, as long as it's not really a cry for basically being pessimistic or anything like that. These people are living in an upside down world. So you have to think of just inverting the world. So you'll see all these things that they say, this is really bad. You have to remind yourself these people are insane. So they're kind of in opposite world, and it's actually probably good. So whatever they say is really, really bad, it's probably good. And so as things get worse, you can celebrate, and people go like, how can you celebrate something like that? The next pandemic arrives. How can you celebrate? Well, this might be the thing that ends industrial civilization, which is the thing we really have to worry about. You see, people forget that the pandemic is a symptom of industrial civilization. Like, this wouldn't happen to hunter-gatherers. It wouldn't happen if we had low population densities. So everybody says, we have to learn the right lessons from the pandemic. Well, what a pandemic's trying to tell you is that there's too much traveling. There's basically the population density is too high, and people's health is too low. So no one wants to hear the message that a pandemic's sending. But if the reason is because we hold ourselves to a different standard. We're not objective about ourselves. If we were livestock, right? If we were, completely objective, if we viewed ourselves like livestock, like a farmer views livestock, he would say, oh shit, my whole herd has come down with rinderpest or some pest disease or, something. And he'd say, well, it's obvious we're keeping these animals in too much, confinement. We're basically circulating with too many other herds. They're in contact with too many other. They would quickly sort it out. It wouldn't be a big problem. But we can't be objective about ourselves. So then we say, the lesson is that we must come together to fight these things. No, coming together is the last thing you want to. You don't want a unified response. What the pandemic is telling you is we need diversification. We need to slow down. We need diversification. We need to break all these supply chains and all these communications. It's a global village. We need to have more than one village. So we're all stuck in this global village of 11 billion people. You put 11 billion people in a global village, this is what's happened. There will be diseases. It's unbalanced, right? So as things rectify themselves, you should celebrate. But as they rectify them, all these mad people are going to say, this is a disaster, this is terrible. And you're like, what are you talking about? Look what's happened already. People have slowed down. People have reevaluated their lives. They're everything that Extinction Rebellion wanted, but they still think it's a disaster. It's like, why? You're getting what you were campaigning for. You got it for free from the virus. But people don't see that. But
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of critical of the vaccination. It's not just, I'm not into all this. I don't know enough to be able to analyze things like Kevin and all these things about the vaccine and, all these things that can happen to you and it can make you. I know there is a lot of dodgy stuff about it. I don't deny that it hasn't been tested, but my main reason for being against the vaccine is that it's going against the purpose that we have to bring down industrial civilization. And I think that we need to do everything we can to sabotage this program of vaccination, because it is a passport to get back to business as usual. And that's one of my main reason why I will not get vaccinated, and I will try to get people not to get vaccinated too around me, because it's an act of rebellion and resistance.
Yeah, yeah. There are a couple of things I got to say about that. One of them is yeah, I absolutely agree that it's how the system rectifies itself. So even if it was a lab leak from the Wuhan lab and then it's artificial, man-made, it's still part of the system, because the guys are doing gain of function research, it's secret bioweapons research. And so, the fact that they're doing that is part and parcel of our system. It's part and parcel of having national governments funding this stuff. It's part of having a military industrial complex. If you've got a military, the military will do this shit. So basically, if you're having a vaccine, you're enabling the military in a roundabout way, because all these guys are not being held to account. If the vaccine worked, which it won't, but I mean, if you could get to herd immunity and control the disease and wipe it out like polio, fantasy. But anyway, that's what they're pretending is possible. So then, if that happened, why would they stop doing bioweapons research? They've got a great reason now to find these fucks and prosecute them in The Hague. But it's still part of the system, and this is how a system corrects itself. Systems have an innate evolution, and that evolution becomes more complex. In that complexity, it becomes Byzantine, and the Byzantine nature of it defeats the entire system. And that's what we're seeing. But here, these guys saying like, oh, we're propping up it's the Ottoman Empire, guys. The Ottoman Empire needs to fucking crumble and die. It's a rock dead system. It's a sick man, and it needs to fucking die. But everybody's rushing around saying, we'll prop it up, we'll prop it up. One of the primary things against having a vaccine is you're propping up this death machine. You're enabling this death machine. You're like the doctors in Auschwitz. You're saying, well, I'm doing good because I'm saving the lives of prisoners in Auschwitz. No, you are saving the lives of prisoners in Auschwitz, but by doing that, you're supporting the system. If you refuse to treat the people in Auschwitz, the Auschwitz system wouldn't be functional. So you're making a death machine functional by doing these vaccines. And nobody says that. It's so obvious. That was one thing I want to say. The other thing is, somebody said to me this week, to show you how people are living in upside down world. We had the pandemic conversation, and they said, unfortunately, they know that, well, okay, I won't say that. But we had the argument about vaccination. So my friends are vaccinated. So then they said, I said, at this stage, we can't reach herd immunity. You might as well just forget it. Just carry on. And I was shocked by the response, because what they said was, no, you have to do a vaccination program. Otherwise, if you just let things happen, you would be playing God. And I was like, what?
What?
I mean, it's a completely inverted world. I said, no, trying to control it and doing vaccines is playing God. They said, no. They said, like, no, just sitting there and doing nothing is trying to play God. It's like that's how screwed up people are.
God is the incompetent clockmaker, right? Doesn't do anything.
Well, no, God is this left brain of ours that wants to intervene and control everything, and that's why it's not possible for. Look, our brain can only do so many computations a second. It has like, you know, maybe 80 billion neurons, 87 billion neurons or something at the last count. But you know, something with 80 billion synapses, if you think of them, they're not transistors in a computer, but let's pretend they are. If they have that, they have a computation rate, and they're finite. It's very unlikely that a system of that complex as it is, and everybody has all these superlatives, oh, the human brain is the most complex thing ever evolved in the universe, blah, bullshit. Complete horseshit. It's bullshit, from stem to stern bullshit. But anyway, we love ourselves, and the alien cortex is a complete narcissist. So alien cortex tells us it's the most fantastic thing that ever happened. That's 87 billion neurons, finite capacity. Okay, now think about a system like the ecosphere or the climate, right? The weather systems of the planet. How many different parameters and things? I would say maybe one for every molecule. Every butterfly, everything is basically, we just went through the 80s where there's, you know, guys like Lorenz said that we can't predict the weather because of the butterfly effect. We completely ignored them and carried on to psychopaths like David Keith and Ken Caldera. No, we can control the weather. It's like, how, you moron? You have 87 billion neurons. How do 87 billion neurons have the computer capacity to actually control something with how many butterflies are there in the climate system? How many, you know, trees are there that deflect the wind? How many gusts of air? How many waves on the ocean? It's astronomical number of parameters. But this stupid fuck system with 87 billion nodes in it thinks it can control these trillions and trillions and trillions of parameters. It's so fucking bizarre. It's unbelievable. But why does a stupid lump of gray shit think it can control this vast, vast, vast planet? You know, I mean, I just sailed here to this Anchorage today, and how the weather changed. The fucking, you know, just each channel, each, you know, basically rock outcrop, everything, the waves. The amount of changes in like 1 square centimeter in the thing, it's just so incredibly complex. And the idea that, oh no, you can average it out. It's like, you can average it out for a little bit and you can look smart until basically the computation overwhelms you. And so that's another way of saying that the living system, the ecosphere, is Byzantine. It's mindlessly Byzantine, right? But it's the reason why it doesn't collapse like the Ottoman Empire or, you know, basically industrial civilization is because it's self-organizing. So in other words, it's a Kantian whole. Each one of the parts contributes to the whole, and the whole contributes to the parts. Now, that's not true with our systems. Our systems are partial, right? So they're basically, the industrial economy is a partial system. It's kind of like a little bolt-on to the biosphere. And so because it's a bolt-on, it's like, here's a little test for you, is what does military industrial civilization contribute to the functioning of the biosphere? It has no positive contribution. It just has negative contributions. It basically has extraction and emission. All of them are superfluous to nature's requirement and are out of step with nature's processes. So all the mining that goes on is like accelerating geological weathering processes by 1 billion times faster. The rate of emissions is more than the plants can take up. It's basically, our industrial civilization doesn't fit. We've you know, basically made a little corner where we've made this kind of parasitic system on top of the self-organized system. So in other words, a good analogy is cancer. It's basically, cancer doesn't contribute to the maintenance of your body. Every organ in your body, your heart is part of a Kantian whole, because your heart pumps blood that sends oxygen to all these other things, and basically allows a metabolism. It gives your muscles kinase so that they can articulate and they can go and run after food. You can get that food, you can feed the gut will get oxygen that will go to the heart. And so the heart does its part to keep the body alive, and then the body does its part to keep the heart alive. And how it got here is for 3.7 billion years of self-organization. You can't just make a new one on the side, say, well, I want a new organ over here that I'll stick in my chest, and I wanted everybody to just fit in. And well, yeah, okay, but you've got to wait 3.7 billion years before basically that settles in to its Kantian whole. So basically, whatever the opposite of a Kantian whole is, this part, a Procrustean part, is not going to be stable for long, because it's running on a deficit, and that's what people won't believe. They think we can create some new system, de novo, out of nothing, and have it basically being compatible with this 3.7 billion year old system. It's like, where do you get that idea? What? I mean, you can't even make a campfire that basically is compatible with the rest of nature. Nature is just strong enough to absorb your campfire. But if we were chimps, we would have our part. We would basically be, semi-carnivorous. We're omnivores. We have our part. We would chase like predators. We would chase the herds around. We would thin them out a bit. We would keep them moving so that they didn't eat too much of the vegetation. And we would eat fruit and berries and stuff, all the things, and then we would shit them out, and then that shit would aid the plant itself to grow, and that's fine. But then we all integrated at that level with the ecosphere. But then these guys like, okay, make a big square field of 1 hectare, and they kill it. Immediately they plow everything up and destroy all the natural habitat. So it's a virgin soil in essence. And then they start basically trying and imposing a new ecosystem in this 1 hectare. That's what agriculture is. It's never going to work. It's going to work if you keep on expanding it, right? Because it's a deficit. So the first idiot that made a plowed field, it appeared to work because you keep on expanding it, right? Whenever basically you get the crops, basically you can do crop rotation, but it's kind of like keeping 3 corpses. It's just kind of reducing the impact. It's not really eliminating. So even crop rotation doesn't work. So
it doesn't work.
The only way you can make it appear to work is with growth.
It doesn't work because you're not giving back what you're taking out. That's all. That's the soil is depleted. That's why it doesn't work. Unless you know.
Yeah, because I mean, from the Kantian whole point of view, you're taking more than the body allowed. So in other words, say you're a new organ like the heart, or so you're an organ like the heart. The heart doesn't take more energy or more oxygen or any resource more than the body has adapted to do over 3.7 billion years. So it just takes exactly what the meta system gives it, no more, no less. And it gives back exactly what it's required to in this ensemble. But if you come and do farming or something like that, it's an imbalance. You've got to take out more than that area, that hectare produces. And so you say, well, why did these people do it? And the reason is they're trying to reduce risk. Right? They're trying to do the same thing as they're trying to do with vaccines. Is they're trying to get control, make things predictable, and basically so that they're at the vagaries of nature. So it's another way of saying it is they didn't like Kairos because they didn't know what they were going to get tomorrow. See, they didn't like being an organ inside the Kantian whole because you have to fit in with whatever the meta system gives you. And so they didn't like that unpredictability. So what our whole system is based on is the clock. And what the clock is trying to do, what they're all trying to do, capitalism, guys in power, you name it, why they all serving Kronos is they're trying to make everything regular, predictable, and governed. So a governor is something like on a steam engine that just regulates its cycles. And the idea is that if you can make something pay out on a regular basis, you won't have the risk. You can make every season you can try and get a crop. Then you don't have to worry about the fact that, you know, some years a hurricane blows in and so on. But from the beginning, the guys found that they struggled. So partialists struggled with the fact that they couldn't get consistency. So if you know, the Bible and all these things, they open. These are pastoralists. They're starting to write, and so they open with these books, and all of them are like pleading for, like, please give me good crops. You know, please send the rains. Please, all the Old Testament is about pests and crops and predictability and, you know, livestock, and probably because the guys are struggling. So they didn't get, right from the beginning, they didn't get what they were trying to achieve. But we're still in pursuit of this madcap predictability and lack of risk. But we're adding more risk by doing it. There you
Thank
go.
you. Thank you for expounding on that. And it's probably a good segue to honor Gary's request about some discussion about letting go or still not letting go, and then the point of risk and our brains that try to, like Sophie said, we try to survive, so we have the fight, flight, or freeze, and if we see risk, those are our reactions. So maybe it's a good segue to discussing what Gary requested,
It is.
if you are inclined to do so.
No, it's a very good segue, because notice how similar it is to what we've just been talking about. The idea is you're trying to get control, right? So the idea of not letting go is what, you know, is you don't want to give up to nature and, you know, circumstance. You don't want to accept what Kairos gives you on the day. You wanting to things to be other than they are. So it implies that you want control, but it's delusionary from the start. You don't have control. The control you have is borrowing, right? So it's kind of like a budget. So you can say, you know, oh well, you know, I'll get control of this. I'll get control of the pandemic or something. And people say that as if there's no price to pay. But what they're really doing is they're creating a deficit. So what you control in one way, you will pay for later, and generally with interest. So that's what's wrong with farming. Everything where you try to get control. So it's that thing I said with the forestry management in Germany. Guys got rational about a forest. You get very good returns when they start out because everything's rational. They got, you know, they got all the fir trees and they analyzed what's the best soil for fir trees. So they put the fir trees, then the birch trees. They said they analyzed them and they put them in their separate areas. So they do all this apartheid, and then they maximize the forest output. For a while, after 100 years, the forest is all dead. And the reason is they all had all these symbiotic relationships. The birch trees and the fir trees were together. It was actually efficient because, you know, it was a canton hole. The birch trees were giving nutrients and mycelium net, and it was just keeping the moisture. One gave shade that produced the mosses and kept the ecosystem going that allowed the pine to come up. When the pine came down, it actually made a nurse forest, and this plant, you know, helped with fire. And it all freaking worked. You can make it work better for 100 years, and then you pay with the entire forest. And that's what people don't understand. So they never ask. You know, they say things about, let's control the pandemic. They can't let go and just say, look, let it run. We'll take its course. Then then no one ever asks, what's the price of that? So there's got to be a price. You know, it's like everybody thinks it's a free lunch. Oh, we'll get the vaccines and conquer it. Say, okay, what's the price? It's not the price of the vaccine. You're paying the price in some other way. You're paying the price because probably you forestalled the corrective action. So there's normally a pandemic would come about because of systemic reasons. Is basically it's a Malthusian thing. So you're not getting, it's kind of like healing, it's the cure. The disease is the way it, you know, brings things back into balance. It's a kind of a bit eugenicsy, but it is the way nature can regulates things. So by doing the vaccination or something, you're saying the part of the price is you're not letting the system regulate. So it means that you're building up a deficit. And so people have to think in that way. But okay, but here the major thing, so that's one thing, but the major thing about what Gary's saying about letting go. So really the ultimate thing we're talking about letting go is fear of death. The reason why we want control and the reason why we want to control risk is because we're scared that some boogeyman's going to jump out. The tiger's going to jump out one day and kill us. And it is. That is the truth. The problem is, it's a false logic to say that we must do everything we can to make sure the tiger doesn't jump out and kill us. It's like, really, tigers are also part of stuff that regulates the system. So you must think in terms of your own death as being, you know, your death is unlikely to come from something that isn't self-regulated. It will, in industrial society, it'll come for some perverse reason. But if you were a hunter-gatherer, it would come from something like a, you know, lion jumping out or a crocodile or a disease or something like that. And so all of those are part and parcel of a kind of a workable system. Leibniz had this idea. So Leibniz had this idea that it's the best of all possible worlds. It's not entirely true, but I mean, it's a workable system. So it means it's a self-organizing system is a better way to say than it's the best of all possible worlds, because they lampooned them afterwards, saying, you know, Mr. Pangloss, and, you know, I think Pasteur and those guys, they said, you know, Leibniz is an idiot because anybody can imagine a better world than this. What they were really talking about was industrial society. But if it was all hunter-gatherer and stuff, then, you know, it's really hard to imagine how to organize the world better. Look at our spectacular failure to organize the natural world better than it was. It's like it always does fine if we just let go. But, so that's one thing to say. The other thing is that the caring thing about not letting go is, okay, not letting go for Gary, this is for Gary, it's not a goal. The aim, it's not something to aspire to let go and not care. It's a result. It's a symptom of what the real goal. The real goal is wisdom and understanding. So the belief in, say, Hinduism or in Zen is that if you reach a state of wisdom and you really understand the world, then you will automatically let go. And the reasoning is that you would do an inquiry into what is the self, and that inquiry in you know, it's basically the first of the desiderata. It's like know thyself. So in the pursuit of knowing yourself, you should come to a point, if you analyze it enough and you philosophize enough, the individuality disappears, so that you start to see yourself more as part of the system, the bigger system. And in the case of Hinduism, you say the bigger self with a capital S. So your little self, you would analyze it out of the picture, because it's an illusion. the only thing that really exists is the greater universe. And you must be a part of it. Even if you just like the materialists say you're an emergent part of it. Basically, we are just material stuff, and we self-organize, and then basically consciousness emerges out of that. Even if you say that, then it still means that the prima mater, the basic material, the physics of the universe, has precedence. And so we just temporary, and we emerge out of it. So then once you realize that, and you stop identifying, look, we all exist, right? We are individuals, but we're not. The important thing about an individual is, does the individual die? And so there's a huge distinction to be made between our imagining death, right? So our alien cortex looking ahead and predicting its death and fantasizing about it, which is utterly, utterly fiction. It's not even close to, however you imagine your death, it won't be like that. And anyway, your alien cortex can't imagine not existing. So it is functionally incapable of imagining a true death. When you actually die, you're not really going to worry about it, right? All the people around your deathbed might worry about it, or watching you bleed out on the tarmac and a car, when a car hits you or something. Is those people might in far more stress than you, right? So when your actual death comes, if you actually look at, say, something like a nature documentary, you have a look at, say, a gazelle or something brought down by a lion. They fight and fight and fight. They're really going for their lives. There's a lot of adrenaline in them and stuff. But when they get caught, you can see they go into this kind of shock, and they stop fighting all that hard. You can see that it's not so bad, right? And that's in human experience too. If you've ever been in one of those situations where you go into shock, you get DMT and stuff like that, and you get into a kind of a high. So it's not traumatic, and it's not the experience that your alien cortex is running around trying to avoid every day. So when the phone rings, your alien cortex goes, oh my God, that's the boss. If the boss fires me, if I do something wrong, the boss will fire me. If I get fired, I'll starve to death, and all my family will be destitute. Horror, horror, horror. And it has all that, that entire complex is all embodied in the response to the ring of the phone when your boss calls. And so, and what's at the heart of it is this idea of me and me surviving, and the alien cortex's idea of me terminating. So if you analyze and say, well, what is this me? It disappears almost immediately. If you really pursue it, and you say, what is me? It's well, me, me, me. Me. It's like, yeah, but exactly me. Like, if you lost your hand, would me be slightly less? Would say, no, my hand's different. My hand's different. It's somewhere around here is me. You say, like, but really, people have been lobotomized. There are people that have lost one hemisphere of their brain, and they're still semi-functional. And you say, like, even if you lost half your brain, you'd say, oh, well, I've lost half of me. I'm half the person. You're not. The bit that remains is still as functional as it can be, and as conscious as it can be. So no one has a real feeling of being a diminished person. And I can prove it. If you have, knock back a few gin and tonics, and your alien cortex will start to be numbed, right? They'll start to be anesthetized. Or you can get a 9-volt battery or cranial stimulation that is very popular now to do this stuff. It basically disables your alien cortex. The subjective experience there is still just the same. If you're half drunk, it's basically you don't feel like any less you. You can feel your consciousness going, but that essence of that feeling of being, or what they'd call in Hinduism aham, is it doesn't diminish, and you never get divided. You never want to like, whoa, hang on, I just split into 3 people. Whoa, this is it's like it's always singular, and it just changes modes. It never actually you never actually experience it as dying. So if you analyze that, you say, well, what exactly? You really are the bits and pieces of stardust, and carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and basically they all came together to make it in this massive complexity. But it has to be, because you can see other people running around the place and models of yourself. In other words, it has to be that it must be something inherent in the universe. It must have something to do with electricity and energy and time and space. But it must survive after you, because some other organism can pick up every component of your body. You will probably be cremated. And when you get cremated, your ashes will be scattered. Ask any physicist, the last water molecule will be accounted for. It'll be taken up in some hedgehog somewhere, or some seagull will get some fish in the ocean, the grass, and then you push up a few daisies. But every bit of carbon, there won't be a single molecule that isn't accounted for. So if all those carbon atoms that you had and called yourself you can go into a daisy and a hedgehog and a blade of grass and push those, and then they call it you, they also presumably have a sense of identity. Then you have to say, well, the sense of identity is borrowed from the prima mater. It's borrowed from the chemicals and the energy of the universe. And so then once you come to that conclusion, you say, well, then what the hell is dying? And you say, well, it's a fiction. It's a fiction for the alien cortex. So you don't have to. So that is a place of wisdom. That once you get to that, then you don't have to let go, because it's automatic. It's like if you really, really appreciate what I've just said, then there's nothing to let go of it. Except that you might get a jump fright or something like that, which is other layers of your brain, like not the alien cortex, like your spinal cord. That if a tiger really jumped out now, you would leap and run, but you wouldn't deliberate about it. That's different. That is not the same thing as your boss ringing up and you thinking, "Oh God, I'm going to die now." That is a real situation where you really are going to die, and we're hardwired by evolution for it. So there's circuits in our brain that knows what a tiger is, or not a tiger, but particularly a leopard. We're basically, for most of our existence, we were cat food on an African plain, and leopards were our big enemy, and also predatory birds. So we evolved with those birds, and so we have all the circuits that tell us you're in deep shit because there's this eagle coming down on you. It's like, you're in deep shit because this is a crocodile. Those jaws are going to really eat up. And then, or basically, there's something moving in the grass over there, and it's probably a leopard. Now that is high octane adrenaline response, and it's completely natural, and it's unpremeditated. And so that's a normal response. You can get the Buddha would leap if a tiger jumped out. If the Buddha didn't leap when a tiger jumped out, there's something wrong with him. He's done something in his practice that has made him inhuman, and you don't want to do that. See, a lot of people are doing Zen and they're doing spiritual work, and they turning themselves into trans in a way. They're making themselves inhuman. So, and what I mean by that is they're getting to a point where they get to be class A ninjas and black belt guys, and then either they respond with a ninja move when the tiger comes, or they say it's all one, and the tiger can jump out and eat me. Both of those are aberrations, and you don't want to go there. A lot of guys are going there. You don't want to go there. You don't want to make a freak out of yourself and make yourself unnatural, go against your evolution. So we're hardwired for, to be scared of tigers. And so you shouldn't say, oh, I'm a Buddha, I'm a good Zen guy. And so, if the tiger ate me, that's fine. And, it's like, nah, dudes, don't want to do that. That's freakish nonsense. That's like transhumanism. That is the essence of control. It's Makya. You don't want to go there. So, so trying to reach perfection, a lot of these guys trying to reach perfection, no names, but I can think of a couple we talked to recently. But, those guys trying to polish themselves and achieve perfection, that's what they're trying to do. It's ultimate control. It's transhuman. They're trying to transcend this earthly body. And that's the alien cortex. It's basically, it's romancing death. It's romancing this world. It's utterly controllable.
May I ask you a question? How can they do that sort of control over their reptilian brain? How can they manage to cut off the reaction of fight, freeze, and flight? How can they do
by honing their attention? So by honing their attention, so that you can strengthen what they call in Hinduism buddhi. And I had a business partner, an investor actually, who him and his brother, they have a scientific paper written about them, but they could both control their autonomic nervous system. Now, in conventional medicine, they say it's impossible. You cannot control it. And they showed that they could. They could say, speed up your heart rate, and they could speed it up, speed it down, speed up their blood pressures. They had complete control of their autonomic nervous system. Now, normally you don't have that because it's dangerous. But if you do enough practices, if you control your breathing, control your heart rate, like that guy who does the freezing guy, that guy that's Russell Brand went, the freezing guru guy.
Oh yeah.
See, all of those guys are getting Wim Hof. That's the guy. Yeah, they're getting more and more control over things. So what that means is, I think what's happening, if I do some hack neurology here, is particularly their frontal lobes are putting out dendrites. And they're making long connections to bits of the brain that wouldn't normally be connected. So basically getting close to the spinal cord and stuff where a lot of this stuff, the cerebellum.
But the amygdala is not, you can't get there. Like there's no pathways to the amygdala.
They are through secondary means. So you can control your amygdala, or even your cerebellum. Look, I can control my cerebellum just by banging the drum. So you control your cerebellum with thought. You can control your amygdala very easily. A lot of these guys, CEOs and stuff, in high pressure and business environments, have complete control of the amygdala. A lot of guys say, oh, well, they've burnt out their adrenal gland and stuff. But what you see, if you just a soldier going into battle, having courage and forcing yourself to go into battle against fear, that's control of your amygdala. So each one of these layers does suppression of the other layers. So if the suppressive ability of the upper layer, like say the alien cortex, you can increase that. And I presume what you're doing is you're making more and more dendrites. So you have more and more control. And then it has more and more suppression of the other layers' response. And so the amygdala would give a weak, say, fear response. And you would have a strong control or suppressive response from your alien cortex. And then, but yeah, with practice, you can keep on doing, especially if you have feedback. You see, So it's easy to train people with machines, right? So that if you give people some feedback loop, like they can monitor their heart or an ECG or something like that, they can change their ECG and they can change the EEG and stuff like that because they can see it on the screen, and then they can learn to basically get into a state that alters what they see visually. And so, yeah, there are lots of techniques. But see, all of those techniques, that feedback is self-observation. And that's how these like Zen guys can get to states where they can sit in the snow and change their metabolism and stuff. And that it's self-observation is really the subjective way of describing it. But you don't want to do self-observation and turn you into a freak, a machine or a superhuman, Nietzschean Ubermensch. You don't. That's not wise, right? You'll be dysfunctional. See, imagine if everybody did that. Again, go back to the Kantian hole. If we have our evolved place to be in the Kantian hole, if everybody became that kind of Zen person, it wouldn't work. For one thing, those guys are celibate. They have control over their sexual instincts. So we would soon die out because we wouldn't breed. We would sit in the snow all day. We would meditate all day. We would be a fucking disaster as an organism. So what those guys are doing is freakish, and you don't want to do it. Right? Those guys are unnatural. You don't want to be unnatural. But you do want to, but we've got into an unnatural state. Our alien cortex has led us into a maladapted evolution. So you want to, and it's fixed. It's fixed in our genes. So you want to get away from that back into a natural state. And to do that, you can use your alien cortex to use philosophy and observation, to the mirror, in other words, for it to nullify itself. So in other words, its yen to control can be turned back on itself, have control of itself. In other words, it has restraint. This is the one thing we just don't fucking have as a species, is restraint. And this is why we're heading into collapse now. We cannot restrain ourselves. We can't constrain ourselves with climate change, with industrialism, just nothing we can control. We just have no self-restraint. But the alien cortex can be brought back and strengthened in the same way like people who can get control of their autonomic nervous system. They can actually get control of the alien cortex too. And once you do that, then you can get control of this idea, this false idea of death, this imaginary bullshit idea of death, this Hollywood idea of death, and this the way we think of our death, which is just it's just a supposition. It's a substitute for our real death. So we get rid of this fake substitute imaginary version of our supposed death, which is just a fiction, and then we can get back to the real natural instincts, which are, if a tiger jumps out, you go, whoa, I'm out of here. And then, that's utterly reactive. That's a real emotion that goes back for, 3.7 billion years. So we don't want the superposition that we've got in the last, say, 60,000 years. Like that's when evolutionary we've gone a little bit off into the weeds. And we don't have to do anything. But if we don't change in this way, we're going to get garbage collected. The system's going to heal us, which is getting a little taste of it with COVID, is a little bit of the system saying, I think this species needs a little apoptosis. Let's just trigger a little bit of cell death. and in some ways, what those Zen guys are doing they're doing a suicide. So they're doing an evolutionary suicide, and so they, in a certain kind of way, they have this nihilistic thanatos, this death wish, and it's dripping with a death wish. A lot of the Zen stuff, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about the shaved head, phony baloney guys with an aura who like ultimate control guys. But those guys, they they're kind of castrati. I often feel the same with transsexuals, and that there is an element in the LGBTQ community where all that basically sacrificing of breeding is a kind of a healthy response to where we've got to. Is we kind of have self-recognition of ourselves as a pathogen, and we doing voluntary extinction. Our alien cortex is starting to do voluntary extinction. It's a terrible place to get to. No animal should get to the place where it's starting to go through the motions of its own deliberate extinction. But you can clearly see on a lot of fronts. I mean, apart from the guys the voluntary extinction movement, that's about as unnatural as you can possibly.
What is the voluntary?
And all of them you can trace. All those ideas you can trace to the alien cortex.
What is voluntary extinction? I'm sorry, I don't follow you there.
It's a voluntary extinction movement. Kind of the Doomers. A lot of the Doomers are on the edge of it. So like even Sam Mitchell and stuff. They kind of self-hating. They go on and on about. They ritualize vasectomies. It's very close to trans thing, where they mutilate their genital organs so that they can't reproduce, and it's the same thing. It's this loathing of an overpopulated planet, this hyper celebration of vasectomies, and just this denigration of breeders, and pejorative words for breeders, and this deep loathing of our species, self-loathing of our species. And in the more extreme Doomer camps, there is a small movement called the voluntary extinction movement of people that say humans should elect to go extinct. There's shades of it even in vegetarianism, all these kind of this austerity thing. It is a kind of a pulling back, kind of an internal self-correction. Kind of like the cancer is starting to recognize that it's cancer. But here's the thing. The cancer is our alien cortex, but it will take everything down because of the ego. So this is the problem about us not being able to let go. Is if you can't let the alien cortex let go, then it will take the whole organism down. So in other words, when somebody commits suicide, they blow their brains out. It's the alien cortex trying to extinguish itself, but it extinguishes every other organ. And I'm pretty sure your heart and your brain stem and your mammalian brain and your reptilian brain, I'm pretty sure they don't want to die. It's just your alien cortex. But you see what a bastard it is? It takes everything in around its blast radius. And its blast radius is the size of your ego.
Well, so, I can say,
nobody ever...
I can illustrate what you say, because I've worked when I was younger, a medical junior doctor, a lot in neurosurgery. And I used to work with people who had terrible gunshots to their heads. And there was a lot of, encountered about a dozen, if not more, people who would try to commit suicide with a gun through their mouth. And at the last minute, the gun would just tilt it so that instead of going straight through the brain, it would blow off front of their face or their eyes or whatever, but they would survive on a last attempt of their primitive brain to save them. And I've seen dozens of these failed suicides like that. And there's been publications on that. There's been articles on that. It's well known in neurosurgery.
But you can clearly see from that the alien cortex is trying to override the other layers. And when they really get triggered, the alien cortex can't dominate them. And then they do a last ditch attempt to try and save the organism, save themselves. But it's even the same with suicide bombers, is that the suicide bombers and that they will tie their hands to a steering wheel or do something which they cannot escape from, because they know quite well from experience that that it's your alien cortex that is on the suicide mission. It has a death wish, and they know from experience that the rest of the brain will rebel in the final seconds and stop you doing it. And so even kamikaze pilots and stuff that have survived, that's their story too, is that, you know, basically it's an effort of will for the alien cortex to suppress the natural instincts. Obviously, we've naturally evolved to be pro-life and to do as much as we can to not die. And so the fact that it cannot suppress those things in the final moments, they do a desperate leap, is an indication of the psychology that's going on. It's clearly exposed that it's only one tiny part of your brain. It's such a tragedy that a bit of your brain that's about as thick as a handkerchief, about as thin as a piece of cloth, and only covers this bit, is deciding to wipe out, you know, your entire organism, and, you know, leave a big hole in the social fabric of where you were. And so, but it's planning. It's done as a plan, and it's entirely in that tiny little area, and it's you can tell because it's not, you know, like the Pirahan people. They don't commit suicide. Hunter-gatherers don't commit suicide. So it's so recent that it's really stuff that's evolved in our urban environment. It's an instinct, you know. Even scorpions don't sting themselves to death when they're surrounded by fire. Yeah, that's a myth. So it's that I can't think of any example of an animal that will actually kill itself. Lemmings don't commit suicide. It's worth looking at suicide in animals, but I think especially in this case, it's entirely a phenomenon of alien cortex. And so the idea of spiritual practice and stuff and reaching a point of wisdom is to basically dissolve the idea of ego, or the alien cortex's perception of ego boundary. And so, yeah, if what your ego boundary is different for each person, because it's an entirely made up horseshit thing. So if you're Hitler, your ego boundary is the geographic boundaries of Germany, of the German-speaking folk. You know, if you Elon Musk, then your ego boundaries might be, you know, the company. You know, basically it might be Tesla, or, you know, it might be, you know, your riches or something. You know, everybody has a different idea of what they think of as themselves. In other words, it's the piece that's saying, if this was lost, I would be in oblivion. So then, and so that's the working premise of, you know, that it's trying to preserve this thing, and then it's almost like a Ouija doll or some kind of fetish. It's kind of like a little substitute for real death, and it's saying, like, it's saying, you know, it's kind of like, what am I trying to say? It's like a diadem that's kind of imbued. It's kind of imbued this, saying, this is my Horcrux, and if this is ever touched, yes, that's where the thought was. It was kind of like the Disney movie with Rasputin, and he has a soul in a little jar. And so then you say, like, if this jar is ever broken, then I would die. It's like completely illogical. But there's no mechanism that you could do spooky action at a distance like that. But that's how our alien cortex perceives it. It has this little idea, and in it, it has our ego, and it has it, in other words, functionally speaking, it thinks, well, my soul and existence is in this little jar. And the jar can be anything. It can be Germany. It can be, your ability to do sports. It can be some talent you have. It can be your works of art. If you're an author, if you're Shakespeare, you could say, I am my works. If you like Louis XIV, you say, l'état c'est moi. The state is me. If you're Queen Elizabeth, I'm pretty sure you think, Britain is your Horcrux, But anyway, what it means is that whenever you work overtime protecting, this imaginary ego, and then that's the cause of all the misery in the world. Because you see, like, look at Elon Musk now. He has death anxiety. So he's doing all of this highly damaging stuff. And one of the most damaging things he's doing is he's perpetrating this myth that somehow we're going to Mars and we're going to become a multi-planet species. In other words, he's saying, join me in my ego aggrandizement and we're going to the stars. Your ego can meld with mine and we can go, he's a cult leader. We're all going to this bigger thing. We're going to get immortality. And the transhumanists are doing it. And, David Keith and Ken Caldeira are saying, like, if we get control of the weather, we will be Superman. We will be eternal and stuff. And it's all this stupid idea that's this projected the living essence onto this small part. But wisdom surely says, no, your living essence must be in the whole, not in the part. And so once you really, really appreciate that fact, then you can let go. You see, Elon Musk can't let go of Tesla because that's his immortality project. And that's his little Horcrux, or his little soul in a little jar. And so he will do everything to fight for that, to keep that going, because in his association, his existence depends on that. And so, but, if you got to the point where you said, like, no, this is bullshit. I'm not Tesla. What is Tesla? Tesla doesn't exist. It's a corporate fiction. It's a legal fiction. It's just a word. It's, it's just like, it's 5 letters. I mean, it's just nuts. What the fuck is Tesla? He could wake up that one morning and do that, and then he would say, like, I've been an idiot. This is a fiction. And he would start running around telling people, like, I'm a nut. I don't need to have Tesla. I'm part of the universe. And then, they would lock him up. Because we all suffer the same brain disease. So if anybody does get that liberation, then we tend to lock them up because they're saying, like, well, come on, you've got to play the game. You've got to have your piece on the board, and then we all play chess against each other. And like, no, we're being stupid. We everything. We're bigger than this chessboard. And it's like, shut up and play chess, otherwise you'll get a straitjacket, man. But if you can get to the point where you have wisdom and you identify, either your ego gets shrunk so small or gets so big it's diluted to meaningless. Say, look up at the stars and say, look, for fuck's sake, man, the carbon in my hand is manufactured in stars. It's manufactured in stardust, as far as we know. So this is stardust. My hand comes from stardust. And, worse still, like this other guy in the video was pointing out the other day, he said, like, the carbon in this hand and the carbon in this hand could come from different galaxies, stars in different galaxies. And so you say, like, well, you got to look up at the stars occasionally and remind yourself of this shit. Because then you say, like, what the fuck does it matter if I get blown apart? Basically, I get cremated. All the carbon in there is still in the ash. It gets scattered. It's still, somebody else takes it up and uses it. And you say, like, you kind of can't see where there's no place for your ego, and then you haven't let go as an effort of will. You've let go as an effort of won't. It's an effort of like, what the fuck. You see, all these things are meaningless, and the effort is to analyze them out of existence. So reason them away. So they're all based on fictitious logic. So if you take something like somebody says, do we have free will? You see, it's a complete nonsense statement. It's not. It's almost not grammatically correct. But at the heart of it, people say they'll argue the house down as, do we have free will? And no one ever says, by what do you mean by we? Does the individual person have free will? Well, the individual person, you know what an individual person is. Well, funny enough, I don't. I really, really struggle to see what you mean by an individual person. I mean, no man is like, sure, in some perverse way, we have an individuality. But it's like, but really, is it really true? It's, you have a subjective experience, but it's so temporary. And so it's like, okay, if you think there's an individual, then say, like, what about tomorrow? Am I the same individual tomorrow? Not really. A lot of the brain cells might have been replaced. I mean, nerve cells and stuff are kind of long lasting, but your liver cells are rotated every 2 weeks, man. It's like, and then most of what's going on, most of the things that you think are your thoughts and stuff, they now know they come from chemicals and stuff in your microbiome. Your microbiome is just basically bacteria in your gut that are along for the ride. They're just passengers in your body. But they have a lot of input to your thoughts and emotions, and to telling you you're hungry, and telling you satisfied, and telling you you're sick, and telling you and healing you. And so they're complete foreign entity, but they fully integrated with you. So when you say, does the individual have free will? It's like, well, are you including the microbiome? It's like, come on. And the more you start to research and stuff, the more you look at it, the more ridiculous all these notions have. They don't stand up to scrutiny. Does the individual free will? Bollocks. It's the bollocks question. It's like saying, how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin? And then, do they have free will? It's like, guys, angels don't exist. The individual doesn't exist. It's like, if so, what's its boundary? So, I mean, think of it this way. So, does an individual have free will? So, okay, well, does a single amoeba have free will? I think most people would say no. So if a single cell is just too simple to have free will, it can't make autonomous decisions. Okay, so if you all agree with that, then an ovum starts out with no free will. We presume the sperm also doesn't have any free will. But now you have a fertilized egg, and it divides. Okay, now you've got 2 cells. Do they have free will? Well, I don't think so. Because if a cell is too simple to have free will, then I think 2 cells are. So carry on like that. So they divide and they divide and they divide. Say, okay, at what division do you suddenly say, bingo, now the person has free will? Is that the 36 week? What are we talking about here? When do you get it? And then say, okay, there must be a point where you have just not enough cells to have free will. Suddenly there's a 1 cell division and everything's changed. Now you have enough. Enough complexity to have free will. But what happened? Why, when those 2 cells did, mitosis and separated, why did that suddenly make free will? It's complete horseshit.
But that's exactly that religious debate on when the human being starts to be a human being, that has been going on for eons, about, in the Vatican and everywhere. When does the human embryo starts to be actually You know, it's just sterile.
But it's all based on this false conception of an ego. So
Yeah.
so we're not permitted not to have an ego in our society. It's an act of rebellion. So but it's a highly desirable goal. In fact, it's necessary, I think, for us to save our species. But I don't think. I think we're probably not going to make it in terms of reaching normality. I think basically we have to kind of die off. I don't think we're really viable because the average dude, most people can't even understand what we just discussed on this. I mean, I can't really look at, say, the headlines in the Sun and look at a Sun reader and say, not to be too pejorative to a Sun reader, but to say that if you look at that level of thinking, I think is terminally destructive. It's the kind of thinking that, has like Mike Pompeo, is like, well, America has to be number one because his ego is America. And then so, basically, well, it's a matter of time before we end in nuclear war. And so I don't see that can work. And you can't, I don't think a guy like Mike Pompeo would take maybe 1,000 years or something to educate somebody like that. To get somebody there to a modicum of intelligence or wisdom of the Mike Pompeo level. And then, so to get the insight, to even understand what I've just been saying here for Mike Pompeo is probably more than 10 lifetimes for him. So no, really, I mean it. I mean, he just wouldn't understand. He just wouldn't understand the idea. No, he's just terminally incapable of understanding the idea. So I mean, I'm sure of it. I mean, I'd like to test it out, but I'm pretty sure that he would listen to what I'm saying. He could superficially understand it in some distant way, and he'd carry on being Mike Pompeo. So it basically, so he wouldn't have the nouns to know that Mike Pompeo needs to be restrained. So psychopaths don't have that kind of self-awareness, and we celebrate psychopathy, and we elevate psychopathy, and so we're just going too fucking psychopath to get the required restraint for us to be viable. And so I think that's the end of our species. I mean, you can't even encourage the enlightened people to go around and knock off the psychopaths. So we're kind of in checkmate from everything, We're not smart enough to override our mammalian brain. So basically, the mammalian brain says, "Oh, you can't be violent." No, at this stage, we really, really, really need to be violent. No, violence. No, that's reptilian brain. No, emergency, reptiles in the nest, save the babies. You say, no, this is saving the babies. Round up the psychopaths, pop the cap in every one of their heads. They will never be reformed. So, but no one will do that. So we kind of got ourselves into this evolutionary checkmate because each one of our modules is self-defeating in this perfect kind of trifecta of competing interests that we can't break out of. But if we could, what it would look like is letting go. So it all comes down to, could we let go? Psychopaths can't let go. We can't let go. Now, is that enough about letting go? The major takeaway here is letting go is not a goal. It's a result, and it's a result of wisdom. And wisdom is the wisdom to discriminate the real from the unreal. And the unreal is your ego, your personal subjective experience as is real, but with limits. And so if you understand that the real is without limits, and your relationship as a subjective being to the real without limits is that's wisdom. So if you know you've done it, because you will stop identifying with this weird ill-defined thing called the individual, me, and you'll start having real problem trying to figure out what people are saying when they talk about me and I and the personal pronouns. You go like really struggle to think, what the hell is this person on about? And that because you completely identified with this the macrocosm.
And then you end up by
But
being a total loner because you don't understand what people are on about anymore, and you just completely just become a hermit.
okay, now that's
Because
that's interesting, because you've just done an ignorant thing about an individual, because you've just said you become a loner. But if you had really understood what I said, then who becomes a loner? It's like, it's not possible to be a loner if you really understood what I said.
yeah, I know what you mean. You don't feel a loner, but you become socially a loner in a way, because when you are with people who are just talking about the individual all the time, you are kind of on the outside socially. I mean, not you.
Okay,
You are
who's on the
connected.
outside?
You're still connected. You know?
Who's connected?
No, physically
I
outside.
haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
Who's connected? Who's on the outside?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Are you getting it? There
Yeah,
is no connection. There is no outside. It's all bollocks.
Yeah.
It's habit, right? It's a habit of a lifetime to basically,
it.
and it's reinforced, encouraged by our culture. But it's saying like, if you were an alien and you look from 1,000 feet up, you look from a satellite or something down on the ground and say, pick out the loners. Go and look at the seagulls and stuff, and say like, you watch the seagulls interacting and fish and stuff like I often do, and pick out a loner. It's all in your head.
Yeah,
No such thing as a loner.
Yeah, I get
Did you get it?
I get it. Yeah. I know. I got it. Thank you.
You see how entrenched it is, though.
Yeah.
How you got from what I said about how the universe and how no man is an island, and you said, and then you go, and once you realize that, you become an island. No,
No. Yeah.
But to be fair, it's
It's tough,
the
though,
language.
isn't it?
It's when we speak about it, it becomes, that's where we trap ourselves. But if we just kind of go out, like an example is going out in nature and just being there and not speaking, then it makes a lot more sense. But when you're trapped in language, then yeah. Do you get it?
That's a very interesting observation, because language is in Wernicke and Broca's area. For reading, writing, comprehension of language is this model just here, mainly on the left side. Little bit of rudimentary function on the right side, but mainly on the left side. And it's part of our alien cortex. So our alien cortex was not kidding when it wrote, in the beginning was the word. The logos is synonymous with alien cortex. So the alien cortex comes with the word. In fact, a lot of people think, oh, well, I couldn't think if we didn't have language. Of course you can think if you don't have language. The alien cortex is just using language. That's all. And it's an afterthought. So thoughts are really going on unconsciously. But then they bubble up, and then the alien cortex claims them, confabulate some story to make it sound like it's in control, and then basically suppresses, or does a bit of suppression. It's a kind of cop. But then the so because of that, the whole thing that an alien cortex is and has evolved to be is encapsulated in language. So in other words, the alien cortex self-preservation and defense is in language. Does that make sense? So it confabulated language as a weapon, and it's a weapon of self-preservation for the alien cortex itself. So it really, the reason why, you know, priests and esoteric traditions and monks and that often do mauna, it's called in Hinduism. It's a vow of silence. Completely fucked up if you carry on doing sign language, because sign language is still language. As language is the problem. So it's making this part of your brain still, and then if you do that, then you know, at least temporarily, you can then at least get a glimpse of a larger ego, or glimpse with subjective experience without ego. But in general, language is there to reinforce it, and it's done culturally. The grammar itself is weaponized to reinforce the ego and protect the alien cortex, to protect that very specific kind of Christian framed logic. And so much so that if you start try to say very enlightened and with wise things, try to say great truths in Microsoft Word, if you have the grammar checker on, it will say this is not grammatical. And it's basically, it is grammatical. You can make some statement about I on the self and ego, and it is actually grammatical, but it's programmed into Microsoft Word to say no, because if you don't have a subject-object relation, and so it's saying that grammatical. So so you say, well, why do you need a subject-object relation? It's like, well, you don't. It's the alien cortex does, because if you don't have a subject-object relation, then the alien cortex doesn't have any justification for existence. So it enforces a subject-object relation, which is what, Sophie, what you just did. That was your alien cortex leaping up to reestablish a subject-object relation. What you were doing there was self-defense. So when you said then you become a loner, that's your alien cortex. And it's using language, saying, look how it says, is you become a loner. So then it's saying, like, I just said you're completely integrated with the universe, and then you said, and that would make you a loner.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Instant inversion. Yeah, I'm not picking on you, but you see, you're advanced in this enough so you don't take it personally. You'll hope your alien cortex doesn't take it personally and then say, like, oh, Hugh's picking on me. It's like,
no, I think it's really funny, actually. I think
you're at a level where your alien cortex is not that low.
No, I think that's actually fun.
What?
I think it's fun. It's really fun. We should do this. All of us
in
the group.
Fun.
Everybody should be coming into this, and we should be laughing about this.
It's like the program is so entrenched. It's hard to break the habit.
Not that the program's entrenched. The program is the entrenchment. So language is the problem. So in other words, you know, if you're a linear thinking alien cortex and you're doing self-preservation, you might hear what we've just said and then come up with this ludicrous proposition saying, like, well, we must make a language that doesn't have this property. What you're missing there is all language does. Language is the definition of basically enforced separation. So it's basically it's the alien cortex weaponized thing. It's inseparable from the alien cortex. So I saw this guy that I posted something on Exomed about the clocks, and that's what the guy said. I laughed my freaking head off, because he had quite a lot of insight about, you know, sidereal time and chronos, and kind of thinking, you know, he got the basic thing, the Kronos is synonymous with slavery and oppression. It's basically control, regulation. The only reason why you want to control and regulate people is because you're sucking off them. It's vampiric. You're a parasite. And so anybody that imposes a clock on other people or imposes punctuality on people is a parasite. And so he got all that. But then he got to the end and he said, but we must, clocks so much represent people and their faces and towering everything. But if that's the case, then we must invent a different type of clock. And he's saying, like, he missed the deep insight that Kronos is the alien cortex. Kronos is control. It's basically, Kronos is the devil and God at the same time. It's Saturn, Satan. It's Yahweh. The Logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
When you were talking about words, it brings back to me that book. I went to pick it up. I don't know if you see it upside down on the camera. It's called Savage Gods, and it's Paul Kingsnorth, and it's his struggle with words. It's all about that. And for a writer, he comes to the conclusion that he doesn't even know if he's going to write anymore. It's a really good book, Savage Gods. If you want, I read it about a couple of years ago, and it's very close. He doesn't name the alien cortex. It's not that, but it's all in it. It's all through the book. It's very interesting. But Paul now has joined the Orthodox Church.
I had a oh, bless him. So, I had a conversation this week with a famous anarchist author about the subject is writing authoritarian. It was a hoot. Because it was exactly that. I said that basically writing was all about control. And so it was anti-anarchist. So, but you see what a complete mindfuck that is for a famous anarchist author. It's like, if you write about anarchism, then you can't be an anarchist. Well, on that note, maybe that's what we should. But yeah, it was really funny conversation because the individual concerned knew all these interesting things, like the ancient Egyptians said that writing was a step down because basically it destroyed memory. The ancient Greeks said the same thing. In Hinduism, there's the Smriti and the Shruti. One's the written word and one's the oral tradition. And the written tradition, which in like our Western mind we would think is superior, they think is actually inferior. So they think that the Smriti degenerated into written language. And that's kind of how the ancient Egyptians thought. They thought that writing was a degeneration of the written word. And it's kind of interesting because the same anarchist friend of mine was just reading James C. Scott Against the Grain in this reading circle every Sunday night, anarchist reading circle. And they brought up the thing about the Zomia people and how they considered the fact that they had an oral tradition that, they actually had writing when they were in the valleys. And then when they became anarchists and moved to the hills, they gave up writing. And James C. Scott says it's because it was risky. He said it was far more advantage to forget your history and be able to change your history and be malleable. And so I use that as an argument to say, historians are trying to set history in stone as an authority to control the narrative, to control people later on. So historians are out for control. They're anti-anarchists, and by extension, most authors. So and just I'll just round it off by saying, if you go back to the first Sumerian writing, it's all contract law. They all basically, all writing is the early writing, and still to this day, the vast majority of writing written today is to control people. It's to control people with contract law, with license, and with computer code. The vast majority of stuff, words written today, will have been computer code. And that's done ultimately for control. Computer programs are done for control one way or another. And so writing itself is a weapon of control. And so the very first thing in Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens, he gives the first cuneiform writing. I thought there was a different one, but it's still the same. It's a contract. And what it is, it says basically, this guy, like, Matuf, has to deliver 3 bushels of grain at this time at this place. And so it's basically, it's a contract. It's binding somebody's future self. And then later they lists, and all the lists are so that they can tax people. So that's the vast majority of writing. But we taught in schools to adore writing because it's like, oh, literature and Shakespeare and stuff. And it's like, but if you 0.1% of the writing that will be done today would be creative writing, but most of it would be commercial, legal. It would be to prosecute people, to bind people, to restrict people. It's all kind of content. So writing first purpose is bondage, and so that's why the Zomia people dropped it. They drop it quickly because it's a freaking liability. Anyway, it's a real tough thing to tell a famous author, especially because they knew I was telling the truth. It's like, damn, can I do my life over? Okay, so maybe on that point, unless anybody's got anything else to say, maybe we should end it there.
Well, what you were saying kind of reminded me of a conversation I had with a guy about philosophy. And I said, basically, the point of the intellect is to defeat the intellect so we can get rid of it.
Yeah. I think that's also the correct use of words. You see, we're using words and language here, but we're using words and language to defeat them. So that's the spirit of inquiry, and you see, words used like that are in the spirit of the mirror. So you should take time out to reflect on these things, think about them, and in that reflection, you'll dissolve the alien cortex, or at least make it subordinate so it doesn't rule anymore. So you want to knock it out of the throne because it's in central position as the throne, and it's a usurper. So there is a good use for written language and for spoken language, and that's, as you say, it's to defeat. The point of playing chess is to defeat chess, and quite literally. Like, you remember that game? That movie, War Games, and the movie is quite profound in the 1980s sort of way, because at the end of the movie they teach the war game computer to play tic-tac-toe and realize there's no winning move. The only winning move is not to play. And that is really, really quite profound. And so I do believe that all games are like that. They're all solved games. Chess and even capitalism, market-based capitalism, is a game of chess played millions of people in the market every day. But the market is a zero-sum game. A commercial market is a zero-sum game. And so zero-sum game like chess, they are all, if you play them, complete. So if you could chess has been solved. It's a trivial game like tic-tac-toe has been solved, and then they all have the characteristics of tic-tac-toe. And that means that you play tic-tac-toe kids are taught tic-tac-toe to show them how stupid it is to play tic-tac-toe. That's the point of tic-tac-toe, is play this game and realize how fucking stupid it is. And so yeah. And then, it's the same with chess. People only play chess because they haven't solved the game. But if you've solved chess for every possible move, you would see that it's like tic-tac-toe, that it basically whoever moves first has first move advantage, and then if you black, you either stalemate or lose. But there's no point in playing chess. It only amuses because you don't have intelligence to actually see all possible moves. But we do in tic-tac-toe, and people get bored with it. But if tic-tac-toe is just an expansion to chess, and all games, even Go, and then if we could solve the capitalist marketplace, the free markets, like chess, you'd also see that it's a game not worth playing.
Yeah, and I
So
also
economists
think
say, well, exchange gives us all this. No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
I was also going to say that even expands to like video games too. There's always this optimal strategy you use. So the chess playing goes right up all the way into video games if there's like a multiplayer or whatever.
Yeah, it's I think all games like that, either like football, soccer and stuff like that, in which case they're endless tournaments without end, so they're completely meaningless because they never have an end. Otherwise, a game that is terminal like chess and stuff, they're all pointless to play because they're all deterministic. They're only amusing because you don't know the proper moves to make. But if you have a complete solved game like chess, you can make a computer that will predictably get a draw or a loss, but never a win. So there's no point in playing. And then I think that's diplomacy and war games and stuff. That, just like the movie said, it is like that. Everything the alien cortex is doing is you only have an alien cortex to amuse yourself, proving yourself that an alien cortex is worthless. You'll never get Mike Pompeo. You'll never get a Nobel Prize laureate. You'll never get Leibniz. They'll never see it. They'll never get it. Kant, none of them. They're all a bunch of stupid cunts. Immanuel Kant, I mean. So that's my critique of pure reason. Well, okay, so should we end it there? It's enough to think about during the week, surely.
Yeah, holy crap.
So the assignment for the week is to come back next Sunday without an ego. And then you can tell us whether that involved letting go. Did letting go just happen? So, okay, so let's all just have a pause and really let go. So this time we're going to let go as an effort of will, just so we can get the feeling of what it's like to let go. But without solving philosophy, just let the words die in your head and be replaced by senses. The subjective experience of listening, tasting, feeling the air on your skin, weight on the chair. Release all the tensions. Let go of imaginings, thoughts, feelings. Give them all up to the universe and let go. Om Paramatmane Nama Iti. Next time we must have smoke and bells and stuff, and then maybe Kingsnorth will come along.
Never know. You never know.
Okay.
Well, have a nice week, everybody.
All right.
Thank you very
You
much.
too. Have a
Okay.
nice week.
Bye,
Thank
You
everybody.
too.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
You too.